Showing you the altitude bearing here, and I'm mounting the FRP riding surfaces. FRP is what we use for both altitude and azimuth. This is double stick tape down to the surface, and it's also riveted on both ends. These are the panels that end up closing up the mirror box. On the top are the retainers that bolt to these panels and then onto the mirror box frame. You'll see all of this later when we complete the mirror box. What I wanted to point out here is that these panels are separate from the mirror box, so they are removable. So you can see I have the retainers bolted on. This is the outside of the panel, and that one over there is the inside. Okay, I'm working on getting the altitude bearings mounted to the mirror box frame, and there was a couple of key points. Showing you here where the altitude drive cable, the end of it, is located in the altitude bearing. It goes into the edge and then through. Now I'm showing you this without the front and rear panel installed on the mirror box, so this you will access through the mirror box cover. Showing you the other side of the mirror box frame. Before the altitude bearing is installed, this piece of fiberglass reinforced plastic is put between the inner surface of the altitude bearing and the mirror compartment area. The thinking here is that this material is a little more thermally stable than the altitude bearing material, and this will act as a baffle between the two surfaces. The baffle is mounted to the mirror box frame with these 4 stainless screws. I finished bolting on the altitude bearing, and it's held on by anywhere from 5 to 9 bolts depending on the size of the telescope. This is the altitude encoder side. You can see the altitude encoder there. I also wanted to show that 4 of the bolts in the altitude bearings that mounted to the mirror box frame also double as the lower truss mounts. The thinking here is that if we keep as few barriers between the assembling components, that it keeps the structural integrity of the assembled scope as high as possible. I'm getting ready to install the mirror box into the rocker, but before I do, I have to put on the front and rear radius panels. This will finish off the mirror box. Both these panels install exactly the same way, but for the purposes of the video, I'm going to leave the back one off just so I can show some good internal views while we're assembling the telescope. So this is a view from underneath the telescope, or the back of the mirror cell frame. Here is one of the angles that was attached to the FRP for the front and rear panels, and then you can see here are screws. I already have the middle one in, and there's 5 screws that hold it in to the underside. And then here you can see it wrapped around the radius of the altitude bearings. Basically it sits, this FRP sits on a lip here that allows it to pull, and then here's the top angle, and this is notched for the handles, and then also goes on to the top of the mirror box frame with 5 screws, and that's how it installs. Here's the mirror box put into the rocker. This would be the front, and you see that compartment underneath the mirror box is where you would put your batteries if you were using internal batteries. Coming around the back, still have the back panel open, and then I have the altitude drive cable just kind of snake through there. I haven't cut it to length yet, but here you can see how accessible the servocat is, the drive motors, everything is very nicely accessible with this design. Can almost service pretty much anything needed to be done without having to take the mirror box out. At this point of the build, I've now assembled the entire telescope to complete the wiring. There's a wire that runs up the truss to complete the secondary dew heater connection, and then there's also 1 or 2 wires, depending on what options you got, going to a corner of the mirror box to complete the connections for the fans and any other options. This is the connection for the secondary dew heater on the bottom ring of the upper tube assembly. This wire will go through the top truss, and then on the bottom in the truss pocket, there'll be other connections depending on how many options you received. These wires come off of the encoder arm that follow through to the podium. This way the wires stay very nice and clean. Nothing binds when you're moving the scope in altitude. Showing you the back of the mirror box with the back radius panel not installed. You can see how much access you would have here, and these panels are removable. Here, this is a good to show you the fan so you can see it rotates completely around. This would be to push air to the mirror or pull it. And you can see if I try to go the other way, the wire would tighten, so take note of which direction. Just move slowly. Also here, I know it's a little hard to see, but there's a compartment back here where I'll put any needed weight during the fabrication of the scope. This weight would be permanent and not removable. After this panel would be installed, there would be another angle on the top here for this baffle to go in. And what the baffle does is it hides the weight pocket and stops any stray light from entering the back of the telescope. Just going to kind of walk around the scope showing some of the details. You can always reference back to these videos for pretty much anything you need, and of course we're available 24/7, 365.